Hello, welcome to our Circle in Time mini-series podcast. We're Sultan and Shepherd. I'm Ned, this is Osama, and we are going to do a deep dive into our trilogy of albums that we've released in the last 3 years on This Never Happened. We have a lot of guest collaborators that helped work on these albums that we're going to zoom in and have some chats about the songs that they wrote with us, and we're going to interview each other and ask each other some questions that we've always wanted to know about these albums. So now we're just going to hop into the first album, Something Everything, which came out in 2021. What do you remember about the time leading up to that period?
I think I clearly remember 2019. We had just played a show in Chicago, and it was a rough show. Personally, we had been feeling like our music was kind of in like a limbo land. We weren't really sure what we were doing.
Yeah, we were lost.
We had like gone on this beautiful high from like 2013 to like 17, 18. We were in the EDM bubble. We were chasing hits. We were trying to do all kinds of music, writing songs, trying to write hits, meeting up with vocalists and trying to get featured vocalists and trying to just like be relevant in the scene. And I think 2017 to 19 was kind of like a slow dying process where it just felt like this was going nowhere. It didn't feel genuine anymore. It felt like it didn't really matter how much you were getting paid for a show. You just didn't want to be at those shows because it didn't feel good. And I think that's when we both looked at each other. We're like, okay, this has got to stop.
Yeah, I just remember being in the studio and being like, we didn't know if something was good or not.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
And we had no direction. No one was really giving us any direction. Yeah.
So in 2000, in the beginning of 2019, then what happened?
It was the end of 2019, I think.
No, it was the beginning. It was the beginning because by the end of 2019, we were on This Never Happened.
That's right.
Yeah, so it was the beginning of
2019.
Yeah.
So beginning of 2019, we basically we decided like we need to stop.
Yeah.
And we need to figure out what we want to do. I remember we went to the conference in Miami.
Yeah.
And we're like, we got to go check out all these different parties and see if there's any music that's going to like inspire us. So then we're like, okay, where do we stand in all this? And I think we decided, let's just not tour anymore.
Yeah.
Let's get back in the studio. Let's just write freely the way it was when we first started 20 years ago, where nothing really mattered but just the joy of making music.
Yeah.
And that's what we did for like
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we finished our album deal, and then we cold emailed Lane 8.
Dan, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Off his SoundCloud. Just looked it up.
Yep.
And sent him some music.
Yep. I mean, we had sent our music out to different labels prior to that, and everyone either rejected us or never wrote back to us.
Yeah. And Dan wrote back. Wrote back, was like, this is great. Can you make something like this for my label?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that was
the beginning of the relationship with Daniel, and This Never Happened.
Yeah, and we're going to talk to him about it. But I think also, like, I don't think either of us really knew what the answer was. We just knew that what we were doing at the time was not working anymore.
Totally.
We thought we were going to release something on This Never Happened, something on All Day I Dream, something on... We just thought we were going to kind of play the field for a while and sort of find...
Which is what we had done for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Which is just like sign to different labels and try to like get into like, a groove of what works best for us.
Yeah. When we were working on, what we were doing before wasn't really that good, and we were looking for a sound. I think there was a bunch of different sounds that were out there that we were sort of dabbling with. Mm-hmm. But then I think we kind of came up with this feeling of like, well, when we started, we made progressive music.
That's right. I think it was kind of like it had been 15 years since we had done that.
Yeah.
And it just felt like natural that was the sound we were trying to gravitate to. I know we were sitting in the studio like getting inspiration, and we're like, let's listen to like the records that we used to love back in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Which is when we started. And when we had started, it was all progressive, melodic, deep, underground.
And that there was a movement of new artists that we were also getting inspired with that felt like they were making records that sounded like records we used to make.
Totally.
I think that was a big thing of being like, wait, this is kind of catching traction. Like,
it's like we did this.
Yeah. Right? And so then we were like, okay, why don't we sort of see what happens if we can take everything that we learned from making, pop music, electronic, like EDM music, and sort of apply it back to that kind of emotional place that we were in.
Yep.
We were sort of halfway there, and then when Dan was like, do you want to make something for me? I think Kochi and Teirona were like the first kind of real deep dives into that.
Yeah. That's why, because Teirona even has like a resemblance of stuff that we did when our first record together, which was
2004.
2004 is Jiva on Bedrock Breaks.
We went back and listened to so much of that progressive house, trance stuff from the late 90s, early 2000s.
For sure. It reflects a lot on the first album that we did on Something Everything.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that influence.
Totally. But I think then that was like when we met, that was what we bonded over.
Yeah.
I remember we would just sit there with those Hooge records and just,
that's right.
Hooge Tunes was the best label ever. Yeah. Those records were made, Dan loved them. He was like, I want to put out this EP. We were going to put it out, and then we put the records out and we thought we were going to just kind of move on. But then
COVID hit.
Well, the reaction to them, I think we were really shocked, because I think all these fans that knew us from those days were like really excited that we were making melodic progressive records again. And all of a sudden it was like, we used to put records out and like it just felt like nobody cared.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like tons of messages and comments, and people were really reaching out being like, I love this. I love Sultan and Shepherd on This Never Happened. It was like, I felt like people were really excited about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think we were both like mind blown by what was going on.
We were like, huh.
Because we had been on like, it'd been probably 2015 to 19 where we're putting out records, and all we really cared about was streaming numbers, and the fan base wasn't really building. And we weren't getting those kind of like reactions, and all of a sudden it's like, what have we been doing?
Yeah. It was weird. And then a month later the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And so then it was like,
kind of gave us a chance to really hone in on what we were doing. So when Dan came back saying, okay guys, let's do an album with 10 new songs, I think that's when we started going through like our back hard drives and seeing what we had as vocals to kind of get a starting point of where to go.
Because it was the pandemic and we couldn't work with anyone. Yeah,
that's right. And we were so used to getting with people in the studio and like writing all these songs. And then we landed on Assassin.
Yes.
What do you remember from that?
A studio date, blind date with two people we didn't know. Yeah. I just remember like PJ Harding and Tonino. We'd been set up and it was awkward. Yeah. And Tonino came up with that line. He had like a list of titles. Yeah. And I remember he said Assassin. I was like, that's cool. And then PJ had the guitar out, and PJ had his guitar out, and he just started writing, and we were like, this is incredible. And then we had it in that acoustic pop format for 2 years or whatever, and then
we tried different versions.
Yeah, we tried like 4 or 5 different versions. We sent it to some labels who rejected it.
Yeah. Or they all came back and was like, who's this incredible singer? But the song wasn't like anything for them. Yeah.
But then, I mean, I feel like there was a kind of moment where we cracked the code, right? Like
we did. I think that was really the moment when we're like, this is how we got to go about these songs. But I think it was a two-way code. One was instrumentally how to go about it, and then the second part was how to treat vocals that are pop and make them more anti-pop.
Yeah, because even Dan was like, I remember he loved the instrumental and he liked the vocal, but he was like, it's still kind of pop.
On the fence.
So we did some pretty crazy vocal processing that became our blueprint for the rest of these albums of what we can do to kind of make something sound cooler. And I think it was also just us getting back to a place of being like, I really like this.
Yep.
Like vocal chops that go on for a long time and sections that are instrumental, it didn't feel rushed.
That's right.
It wasn't like verse, chorus.
No. In fact,
it was,
we like ditched the second verse of that song.
Yeah, so it was a little bit more free flowing.
Yep.
I remember, you were like really obsessed with like nailing that.
I think we also came to a point where we focused on like what our strengths are in the studio as well. So like you're incredible with chords and chord structure, and I'll write riffs here and there, and I think
you were doing riffs every day.
Yeah, we're just like, let's do riffs and then put the chord structure on it. And I think it worked the same way with the vocals, which is why we were able to refocus Assassin to be what it is, because we changed the entire chord structure based on the riff that we came up on it.
This whole time for me, I remember just being like feeling very affirmed that like when we were doing things following our gut, that it almost seemed like they would do better.
Yep.
And we were like, wait, what? The whole time we were trying to be successful, we were not succeeding. And when we stopped trying to be successful and making things that we liked,
then
all of a sudden it was like more successful, and we were like, this is crazy. I felt like a self-help book. I was just like in the studio all the time. I mean, do you feel like you changed when we started making the album? Do you feel like you were a different person after we finished it, or you feel like that the album sort of encompassed like a specific time span for you?
I think for me it was like a turning point. You know, I had my dreadlocks for like so long, and
Yeah.
I know in the middle of that album, making that album, that's middle to near end of it was when I was like, okay, time for these dreadlocks to go.
Yeah.
And it had been 20 years, obviously, since I had the dreadlocks. And I feel like my journey into music and music career started 20 years ago. And having the dreadlocks was a real big part of a confidence booster for me. Like, this is part of my look, this is my image, because it kind of felt like it really mattered back then. I also had like serious insecurities about my ears. And so this was a way to cover them up. But I think when we came on this journey of doing this first album, it just felt like, you know what, I feel really good about where we are, felt really confident in what we were doing. And I think it felt like the right time to shed all that, to shed the dreads. And I'm like, okay, we're starting a new chapter here. I feel good about it. I'm older now. I don't know. It's like a new life. And I think it started with our journey into This Never Happened and these albums.
Yeah.
Was there a specific moment on this album where you felt like you tapped into something cathartic or spiritual?
I felt like every day was kind of like that. I have a video somewhere of us just we came upstairs to get like a snack.
Yeah.
And we were just like cracking up. We couldn't stop laughing. We were just like high because we were having the best time. I feel like that was kind of the vibe on that album, that it was so not stressful. Yeah. But I remember In Control in particular being one where like I came in and you had that riff, and you were like, oh, I put down a riff, and I was like, that's not an ordinary riff, that's a crazy riff. But it came together like so fast. Like I don't even remember putting in the bass line and all the arps and stuff. It just like song like wrote itself.
I remember we were talking about it's like the best songs are the ones that are like the most simple and you have like 4 or 5 elements.
Yeah.
And we'd never been able to achieve that in like all our times working together. All of a
sudden we were like, it's happening. Yeah. That was the feeling I had the most in the album. It was like a lot of this like, oh my God, like this is better than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
You know? Yeah. And I remember like before I would come over, I would always like run up and down the hill listening to what we had done the day before because we would bounce it. Like on Hold Me Closer, I remember like we had basically the track, like the kind of disco proggy groove, and then we had this like big build up. And I remember listening to it on my like run up and down the hill, and I just remember thinking like, make the breakdown longer. You know, I was like, just go epic, you know, and we came in and the next day and I was like, let's extend it by a minute, and you were like, a minute? And I was like, yes. But it was cool. It was like there was no rules.
At all.
And it was very just a very happy studio time in my mind.
We didn't really care about anything but like just making the music.
And we didn't have the pressure of traveling. I mean, that was huge. We've been traveling every week, almost every weekend for like 12 years. Yeah. And it was just like, we were burnt. Yeah. And I think having like nowhere to go, no FOMO, nobody else was playing festivals that we were like jealous about, you know, it was like.
I think that really helped.
Yeah. Helped a lot.
A lot.
Yeah. And we were just like, we got all the time. And I think a lot of other people, we looked around, a lot of artists didn't know what to do. Yep. They were like, well, what am I supposed to do? And we were like, we know exactly what to do, which is interesting because it was like we had this kind of unspoken purpose, which I think became the underlying theme of the album without us really kind of realizing it.
Is there a song on this album that felt like a conversation with your past self?
Yeah, I think the whole thing was, to be honest with you. But I mean, I think Warsaw was like a reference to when we first started making records.
The break beats.
A lot of breaks, melodic breaks. And I was like...
I remember you were adamant about that. You're like, I need to do this.
Yeah, because it just felt like a cool variation of that sound. And Warsaw was like...
It was like an ode to one of those Who's records.
Yeah. And I think Hold Me Closer felt very much like that...
Trisco Muzak.
Yeah, Trisco Muzak. Or like that moment that we had in Peru when we played at Creamfield. I think we played at Creamfields in Lima in
2010.
Yeah,
9?
2009. Yeah, really.
2009?
9 or 10, and we got we played our set, which was cool.
Yeah.
And then before Calvin Harris, who nobody there knew at the time.
Well, no, I don't think anybody knew.
Yeah, and then
We walked into Adventure to the Black Coffee tent.
no, it wasn't Black Coffee. It was somebody else, and they were playing like a techno set, but they played this acid record that went on like for like 5 minutes with the craziest build up, and we got like
Right.
sucked into the like center of the dance floor. Like we were kind of on the edges just watching it, and then like all of a sudden we got like kind of pushed in the middle, and then we were in this huge build up, and we were like we just kind of like went for it, and it was like such a euphoric moment. And I feel like when we were making that record, it was like, you remember that time that we were in the tent in Lima? It was like, how can we get that feeling? But our friend I remember saying that record to a friend of ours, and he was like, he's like, I feel like I'm at Twilo when I listen to this record. And I was like,
Perfect. So you want to tap into?
yeah.
Because we used to go to Twilo back in
Yeah, that was
late
one of the
90s.
biggest inspirations. Sasha and Digweed at Twilo.
That's right.
Dan Tenaglia, Vinyl.
Carl Cox,
Deep Dish, Sona. I mean, we've kind of named tracks after all of our inspirations.
That's true.
But I think it's really important. It's really important to know like where you come from. I think that felt really good to be really connected to where we came from and feel like
Yeah.
we were doing something new, but that it wasn't like such a departure that we were like lost anymore.
Yeah. Like we found ourselves again.
Yeah. After the album came out, I remember like we just thought, okay, the album's going to come out. It's going to be a good response similar to the EPs, and then we're going to move on.
Mm-hmm.
But when the album came out, the response was like,
It's insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
crazy. We were like, oh, we just made
It's like
something.
magnified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really impactful. Then about 6 months later, the world started opening up, and we played our first.
You played our first show.
Yeah, we did some supporting acts for Lane 8. We did some stuff in Vegas and New York at Brooklyn Mirage with him.
That's right.
But our first headline show.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. But I do also want to talk about like when we played New York with Dan. Like we had no idea what
That's right.
we had entered, really. We're just like, okay, we'll play a show.
Sold out Brooklyn Mirage. Yeah, we didn't know.
What, 2 nights?
Yeah, 3 nights. Yeah.
3 nights. And you just discover there's like this whole world of people that love this music and really connect to it.
Yeah.
And so I think we then realized too, like how
Yeah, they cheered. I remember we played In Control, and the part where the
kick and drum.
the kick and bass come back in the middle of the track, people cheered. And I remember looking at them being like,
It's like the anti drop.
yeah.
It's pretty great.
But those were open, like supporting slots, right?
Yes.
So, which was awesome.
Yep.
They were like warm-ups, and then our first headline show
In Seattle.
at the Underground.
At the Underground.
Yeah.
It's packed, it's sold out.
Slammed, yeah.
Slammed, and everyone's there pretty much singing the songs.
Yeah, they knew every track.
They knew every track.
That was a big gig. And then we went and played Red Rocks
Yeah,
the next week with Dan, and we did 2 nights. We opened up for him for the 2 nights. And then that experience changed us. Yeah. I mean, I have my feeling about it. I just remember walking into that place, and I had heard so much about Red Rocks, and it was like, pictures can't capture how it feels. It's like so big, and it was snowing. It just started to like snow, and we were like, oh my God, this is so terrifying. But when we went out, everybody was so excited for us to play, and we played. The first night was like magic.
It really was.
Yeah, and his set was incredible, and everyone was so excited. And the second night, I think we came back from that feeling like we want to play here, and that was like,
This is a goal.
Yeah.
I think we realized that in this journey we're taking now, that there is a path to actually like doing that.
Yeah.
And that you could talk about venues rather than clubs, and you can think about a bigger fan base and think about like really building yourself up that way.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like it's like a bit of a wake up call. I think we're like, what have we been doing for the past 15 years?
What have we been? I just remember feeling like we've been wasting so much time.
Yeah.
But I think that brings up like an interesting point about like failure or perceived failure, because in my mind, we had success.
Yeah.
Early in our career, and then we had sort of a period where it was a little bit rocky, and then we had a lot of success from like 2010 to 2015 or 16.
Yep.
And then we had this period of where it was like
back down.
It felt like a total failure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other people would say, "Oh, you guys are so this did so well, but it was like financially it wasn't really working, and like
It was falling apart.
it was falling apart. The gigs were getting worse and worse.
It's,
and
when you're like, you just start to accept that it's like you're here, and then you accept that you're here, and then you accept that you're here, and you accept it because you have nothing left, and you're kind of like, okay, well.
But then there's a bottom, and I think that what you were talking about with 2019 was like we hit our bottom, and we both admitted that we had. And then the weird thing when you hit your bottom is that like you're free.
Yep.
You're free of all the like negative emotions. You're free of like the shame and the guilt that you feel, of, like the burden of having to like carry this thing. And you're just like, oh, we can do whatever we want. And then it was just like all of a sudden it was like a, like a spirit. It was like a spiritual change. It was like existential like change in your life. Where all of a sudden you feel, oh my God, you feel totally empowered to do these things.
Yeah.
And so, but if you didn't have the failure, you wouldn't have gotten to that point.
It's true.
I don't know. I really appreciated the failure aspect of it. I don't know. For me, I feel like the album very much was a shift between it being about us and our careers versus like actually being artists and making something like that was meaningful for us and meaningful for other people. I think that album for me like
changed that whole perception.
That was like the shift.
For sure.
So we have a very special guest right now, which is our friend Dan, aka Lane 8. So happy to have you on here with us to talk about how involved you were in the albums, even though you get embarrassed about it. But it's so true how you were really the executive producer of all three of these albums in terms of just your input from coaching and being like, this track is amazing, or I think this is not as good as that one, or all those little bits of advice that went across the board made these albums. There's no way these albums would have been what they were without you. So yeah, we really appreciate that. We just want to say thanks first.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really nice that you feel that way. I feel like from my perspective, I didn't really do that much. Like there are definitely albums that we've put out that I did a lot more work on than those. So I feel like you guys are actually pretty easy. I'm glad that you appreciate the input, and it's definitely reciprocated from my end. I love our back and forths. I think we have that kind of shared vision, and I think that's really special. Very special.
Yeah, it's something we really makes the process so much fun, you know? So I just want to jump right into everything, because we talked about that a little bit in sort of the background of what led up to that. But we wanted to know sort of from your perspective, like when we sent you the email and said, hey, we want to do this album, you know, and you sort of were super excited about the idea, but we were the first artist besides you to do an album on This Never Happened. So how did that feel from your perspective? Did that change your sort of perception of what the label was, or was that sort of your plan all along?
That's a good question. I think that for me, when I listened to your music, particularly the demos that you were sending around that time, it felt to me like this is something that would sound really good as an album. So I think there was that side of it. And then the other side of it, which is, I think you guys, one of your many talents is the ability to really work with songs and develop songs. And that's definitely what I always focus on when we're building out albums, like either for Lane 8 or for the label. And I think you guys have a great ability to work with the singers and the writers that you're working with to develop songs in a way that sounds very unique to your project. But also just like on a song by song basis to really develop strong songs. And I think without that, it's quite tough to pull off an album. Not to say that it can't be done, but I think that was probably the main reason why I was so willing at that point to get stuck into an album project with you guys, because I had that confidence that the songs would be there and that would kind of help everything come together in a way that wasn't going to be like tearing our hair out.
Do you remember why you decided to remix In Control out of all the tracks that were on the first album?
I just really loved that main riff. I connected with it right away. still looking back, I think it's probably my favorite track on the album. And I think it was around the time when, because Something Everything came out in like 2021, right?
Yeah.
So it was right when things were coming back. Like we had that big Red Rocks show and I played it at that.
Right.
And so for me, it felt like the song that I was most excited about. And I already had an idea in my head about how the remix might go, which is not how the remix actually went, but it was fine because it got me going in the first place. So yeah, I think it was just like one of the songs that I connected with right away. I in general love your instrument, like clubbier instrumentals. Like that's definitely my favorite facet of your sound if I had to pick one. And yeah, I think like a lot of people will gravitate towards vocal tracks to do a remix of because it's kind of easy. You just like, you know what you're starting with. But I prefer the challenge of like remixing something instrumental because it's almost like building a new track from scratch. Yes, I used the main riff, obviously, from End Control, but even that like was reworked in my own way. And so I looked at it as an opportunity because it gave me more freedom to do different things, sound design wise, synth wise, and yeah, rather than having like a song too that people might be very connected to the original version. I think instrumental is a bit more open to interpretation, a little bit more open to different directions. At least that's how I was feeling at the time. So that's kind of the story of why I picked End Control.
Awesome. It's funny we never asked you this question back then.
Yeah, we were just like, okay, yeah, he wants to remix End Control. Great, done.
Let's go.
I think at the time you probably intuitively understood my reasoning. Like I had been hammering it in every single set at that point, and I think you guys were probably aware of that.
Yeah, we were, for sure.
Yeah.
I just thought you would actually choose a vocal record and not an instrumental record.
Yeah, most people would do that, right? But yeah.
That's also like you always like, I think especially early on, now we know you better, and so now we come to expect the kind of unexpected from you, which is fun. But in the beginning we were always surprised by your some of your choices, that like you were like, oh, I'm going to remix the instrumental record, right? Knowing that it might, be less like more underground or more kind of niche, or like you telling us like in the beginning, I remember some of the feedback you gave us on tracks were like, make it longer, or like more space between the vocals. And it was sort of like this process where we had to like decondition our brains from this sort of pop machine that we had been a part of for so long. And so I feel like that, what you're saying kind of plays into that, where it was like, we were sort of like had to relearn how to think artistically again, and like fun and unexpected and spontaneous. And I think now we're like, cool, we're like all in it, but I think at that time we were still a little bit like 1 foot in and not totally used to that. And yeah, that was definitely an example where we were like, interesting choice, but then it ends up being super cool.
I think what was even more interesting was that you actually changed the key of the track when you did the remix, which to me was like, oh my God.
Did I?
Yeah. So I was like, you can actually do that for a remix?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, you can. I mean, there's no rules.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
yeah.
It must have been something where I was, like usually a lot of times I'll put things up or down because like there's a specific note that I want to hit or a note that I want to avoid or something like that. That's interesting. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think for me, it's like, just getting back to like, make it longer. That's feedback that I still give all the time to our own detriment, often commercially. But I think it's sort of like the comparison, the way that I think about it is sort of like McDonald's versus like a nice gourmet meal. Like if you make like a 2.5 minute track, like it's going to tick certain boxes and it's going to have a certain commercial appeal to it, but it's not going to nourish you in the same way that like a beautiful 3-course meal, like with a nice appetizer and like lots of vegetables and fresh like cut, it's just like very different things. And I think, yeah, McDonald's is great sometimes, but like that's never been my focus on what I think the potential is for kind of what we do. And so I think when you have like a beautiful piece of music, I always have felt this way listening to music. when you have something that you're really into and you're loving, like you don't want it to end. You want it to keep going. And so that's definitely how I feel like when I'm making music, is like, I don't want this to end in like 2 minutes. I want this to I want to really get stuck into this as a journey. And so that's always kind of been my approach. And I think it's kind of interesting because that approach is definitely like dying by the wayside slowly, or not so slowly. But it still feels to me like there are real people out there appreciating it, appreciating the longer arrangements, appreciating like a bit more uniqueness. And so as long as it feels like there are those people out there, then I think it's still worth trying to reach them.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we feel the same way. That's great. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on this one. We'll be back with you next episode. So we're going to jump into a conversation now with a good friend of ours who we've been working with for over a decade now, the wonderful Nathan Nicholson. What's up, Nathan?
Hello. Wow. Yeah, that is a decade. That's nuts.
It's
Yeah.
over a decade.
It's over a decade.
It's over a
You
decade.
guys did the Keep Moving remix
Yes.
Yeah.
in 2013, I think.
2013.
Yeah. And people, and also I feel very like, I don't know what it is, but you do so many amazing vocals now and write so many amazing songs with great dance artists, people that we love and respect and who are incredible. And you sound different on every record. The songs are always incredible.
Thanks.
And
man.
I always feel like our remix of your band was your first kind of, and then the track that we did at that time was your first foray into dance music.
It was, yeah, totally.
So I feel like we're like the
OGs.
Yeah, we're the link for that. And yeah, and having known you for so long, when we work on music with you, it feels really great. Do you want to talk about NEMA and what was going on with you in that time, that you were, whatever you can remember from when we made that song?
What was going on with me, I think, was, well, the lockdown had just happened. So it was like March, April 2020, I think, when we started working on it. And I remember going back and forth a lot on lyrics. I probably have a couple of pages of just lyrics that would fit. I may have even done the vocal for. I can't even remember. That's kind of what I remember about the genesis of that. Yeah, it's had kind of a life of its own, that song.
Yeah, it's pretty wild where that one started and where it is now, and like it like grew exponentially on YouTube, which was incredible.
Yeah, no.
I have a theory about it, which is that I think the lyrics that you wrote for that song are like the perfect pandemic lyrics, like where they're so self-reflective, and it's about this journey and picking the path that you're going to go. And I feel like that really resonated with people at the time. You know, the vocoder effect that you did on NEMA.
Vocal synth too.
Yeah, your vocal synth, like that. When we sent you the instrumental, you came back with that effect on it, and we did a lot of fine tuning with lyrics and arrangement and stuff like that. But your vocal effect, that really informed us of like how we could make vocals sound a certain way. And I think,
that's cool.
yeah,
we use that plugin on every single. vocal
we use it.
So.
We use it all the time, but it was also just like, oh, hey, this texture really works on the music that we're writing right now. And I think that was, I don't know, yeah, we never told you that.
It adds a little bit of depth to stuff sometimes, or like or it helps with clarity actually. But Richard like reached out to me, Richard Walters, and then we started writing together a lot, and so I count him as a good friend, and he's toured with us as the band, and we've written loads of songs. We've had stuff that has been out, and it came from that us both working on
the album,
this record.
Yeah,
that's so awesome.
And then all you guys are like the two nicest songwriters. That was like the best. I remember when you guys connected, I figured it out, and I was just like, I think I wrote you guys a message being like, I'm so happy you know each other.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, to everyone listening, that we were obsessed with you and your band, the Boxer Rebellion. I don't know if everyone knows that you are the lead singer of that band. And like, to me, our entire move to LA and everything that came out of that was so defined by listening to your music and the album Promises and Keep Moving and everything that came with that. And so having you be on this album and continuing to work with you has really been like a beautiful thing for us. It's something we really cherish. So
that really means a lot. I didn't know you guys listened to it that much. I knew like you were fans of it, but that's great.
Yeah, Osama was saying that Boxer Rebellion album was the soundtrack to our move to LA and that sort of phase of our life. So
yeah.
From Montreal, right?
Yeah.
Montreal.
Yeah. And
I remember like you coming into the studio for the first time and recording what ended up being Never.
Yeah.
I think I was like literally starstruck. I was just like, I can't believe he's here doing it. Yeah. You don't understand. It's like,
I remember that day so well. I kind of ran into you, Ned, like at a random place on the other side of LA, and then you drove me over, and then we did our session, and then I went to the Hollywood Bowl. No, yeah, Hollywood Bowl, and I saw Underworld, which was pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a good day. It was a good day.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about this. We're going to have you on for the third episode too, where we talk about Under the Surface and Endless Dawn.
Perfect.
So
excellent.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
I've got solid gold long for you.
So we're going to jump on with Richard Walters, who needs no introduction. He's an amazing vocalist and was an incredibly huge part of this album.
Huge.
What's up, Rich? How you doing?
Good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Before we get into the songs, I want to just say that we were big fans of your music from when you did the stuff with Guy Sigsworth, Elephant in the Room. And that was 2008, 7? What year was that when you made that music?
Yeah, I think actually that I started working with Guy around 2005, so almost 20 years ago. And that was another lifetime. But and then I was of course aware of you guys from there was some overlap with the Morgan Page record. I did some tracks on that and became a big fan of yours around that time, which was probably around
2010.
Yeah. And then we were working on this album and we were talking to This Never Happened about Vocalist. Tom said, well, we're in touch with this songwriter named Richard Walters. Would you have any interest? And we were like, I was like, is it the same guy? I was like, yes. And
he was so excited. I can't even tell you.
I was like, yeah, I was like, the universe is conspiring. And I think the first thing we sent you was an instrumental that became Solid Gold Love, right? It
was called
That's
Boy
right,
Mercury.
Yeah, we had it labeled Boy Mercury, which we thought was the coolest title ever.
I like that. And I think that arrived in my inbox at like the perfect time. It was that first summer of lockdown, which the word we don't speak often anymore. But when it arrived, I had such an emotional connection to that instrumental, and I remember working on the song and kind of feeling. I did that thing where I'd written the vocal and the lyric idea, and it kind of happened in about half an hour. And you ever get that where you work on a song and it comes too quickly and you're very suspicious and you're like, well, this must be terrible. So I'm gonna revisit it tomorrow. And it just really stuck. And I loved the sounds, and it just felt kind of emotional but optimistic, and it was exactly what my head and my kind of creative brain needed. It was a real joy to work on.
Can you tell us what you were thinking about or going through when you were writing that song? Because I think those lyrics have a very broad meaning to a lot of different people, but I'm just wondering what it meant to you when you were writing it.
Yeah, I think it's probably the origins of the song are probably heavier than people might expect, but I lost one of my closest friends in 2019. And the one good thing that came out of that was that it tightened our friendship group in this kind of unbelievable way. It brought us all together. And then with the lockdown happening as well, we were kind of speaking to each other every day on Zoom chats like this, kind of, going to the Zoom pub or whatever, and talking about our friend Jono a lot, who we lost. But it just made me realize that, particularly in male friendships, we tend not to kind of talk about the emotional importance of our friendship and our bond. And we definitely, we skirt around the fact that we love our friends. And for me, I was just thinking about my friendship group, this little circle, and I was thinking, I genuinely just have this love for them that is kind of untouchable. It's it's solid gold love that I feel for them, and I feel that in the kind of the light or the darkness, whichever way you look at it, of an event like losing a member of your friendship group, the big positive that comes from that is that you do feel this ability to share and to trust each other and to kind of talk about anything. So that's really where the song came from. So it's a celebration of friendship, and it's kind of telling people to don't let things weigh on your heart too heavy. Actually talk to people.
That's beautiful. We didn't know that until we asked you to write something for the zine for that album, and then you sent that to us, and we were like, "Whoa!" Yeah. And it's so interesting. It's so interesting how, it's like you just don't know kind of what the origins, what the DNA of a song is, and it doesn't, from the listener, even from the producer's perspective, it doesn't necessarily matter. You can feel that there's a lot of feeling in that. So that there's something. It's not, you weren't just like, hey, this is catchy. You can tell that there was a lot of weight to it, and that makes the song really good. But you don't know why there's a lot of weight to it,
Thank you. I think that's why, doing things like this is so important, because as a songwriter and a music fan, I love finding out where things came from, and it's always unexpected, and and I don't think I've ever had a kind of negative experience from finding out that the kind of deeper meaning of the song was different to what I thought it might be.
Yeah.
So there's a lyric line which me and my wife always kind of revert back to in our marriage and in our lives, and it's one of the lyrics from So I'll Go Love, and it's better spoken out loud than held on to. And I think it's so powerful, and something that I literally, like, our marriage is all about that. Like, we talk to each other about everything, and rather than keeping it in, I think it's been like a very strong motif that's always carried on in that. So she made me this as like a special merch item that I've worn since the day you gave us that song.
That's very cool. Yeah, that makes me feel good. I think, you can go through life, and people definitely do, and I have done in the past, holding on to a lot of things, and you've just got to tell people what's going on.
Speaking of lyrical content, the other song that we did on this album, Something Everything, that really lyrically, I think, became the not only theme of the album, we named the album after it, but I think that phrase, find something that means everything to you now, really became the sort of the thesis of the whole journey of the trilogy of albums that we've done. In the box set, we have a sticker that says find something that means everything to you now, because I felt like that really kind of just encompasses what it meant for us as artists to come back to a place where we had felt so lost in our careers prior to that point.
Well, that means a lot. And I do remember us having a Zoom chat when you guys were kind of approaching the end of the album and saying that it was going to be the title track. I was so touched by that. And that song, I do genuinely think of that as like a a benchmark for things I've worked on in terms of something I'm so proud of, because it holds a lot of personal, emotional weight. And I meet people. I was at a wedding in South Africa at the beginning of the year, and somebody came up to me and was like, "That song changed my life." And I was like, I mean, that doesn't happen very often.
Wow.
The guy was absolutely smashed. He'd been drinking a lot, but that still, it meant a lot. I remember the instrumental that you guys sent me was different to how it ended up. It was, but still very kind of emotive and very cinematic. And then when you sent me back the mix after I'd done the vocal, I was like, "What? This is incredible." I loved it. I loved that constant beep that's going through it. That kind of sounds like, a life support machine or something. It's got this kind of, it's that feeling of, it feels like it's constantly building. I think I was going through my own mood journey during lockdown and kind of coming to terms with some things. And I was spending a lot of time in my studio, just kind of thinking about ideas, but not. Do you ever get that you're at the studio and you've got the intention, but you don't quite get there? Yeah. And I remember sitting down with that track, and like Solid Gold Love, it came just very quickly, and I felt really like a real kind of sense of satisfaction, and like I'd managed to sum up how I was feeling. And that's rare, as a lyricist, you're scraping around, you're trying to find the words, you can't quite make the connection. But with that one, it did feel for me like I managed to say exactly what I wanted to say in that moment, the frame of mind I was in. And I was so proud of that. And I still am. I just think it's a great song. But yeah, it takes me back any time it comes on, anytime I hear that song, it takes me back to a very kind of like a feeling of real excitement, feeling like it was great to be collaborating with such talented people who are making such kind of amazing music in that genre, which is, can occasionally not be amazing. And I thought the production was so forward thinking and so smart, and there was nothing kind of cookie cutter about it. It felt like it was a really well thought out production, and I was so impressed. And fan for life.
Yeah. Same here.
Same here. Yeah.
I think it's actually the only song that we redid instrumentally on the entire album.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I remember we got the demo back with your vocal on it. We're like, this is so incredible. We need to like up the game here on the instrumental to match this incredible emotion that you brought with the vocals. So.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember it was a real joy working on that record.
Oh, that's so cool.
Anyway, so thanks for being on here with us. We appreciate it so much.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Pleasure. And best of luck with the box set release and everything.
Thank you.
We'll send you one.
We'll send you one for sure.
I would love one.
We'll get that.
And yeah, just as an aside, it's insane the amount of work that you guys have done in the last 4 years. It's kind of some artists don't do that in a lifetime. So massive kudos to you for rolling with it, kind of just making incredible records.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being on this journey with us.
It's so meaningful for us, for you to be part of it. It really is. So thank you.
And I'm sure we'll be making music for many years to come together. So I look forward to that.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. We'll see you soon.
Nice one. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
White lights on a cold day. Cigarettes sit around. Think about what I don't say. You don't know me anyway.
All right, cool. So we're gonna dial into talk to McKay Stevens right now. What's up, man? How you doing?
Good, dude. How about you guys? Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. In the studio, looking great as always. So background with McKay, we were introduced to you for a session in 2017?
18?
16, maybe 17.
Yeah. And then we formed this magical friendship with you, and you've been a huge part of these 3 albums. You're like the secret weapon on these 3 albums. Like
the secret sauce.
Yeah, designated hitter, just like coming in, like, all right. But yeah, I think, well, for this episode, we'll have you on for all 3 episodes, which is great. But I think for this episode, we haven't talked about White Lies. And I think, you co-wrote that song and are very close with Neil. So you want to talk a little bit about that track and sort of...
Yeah, it was so magic. It's kind of crazy. Like Neil and I had been working together since about 2014, 2015, become like best friends at the time. Like, we used to work 5 days a week. He played in my volleyball league, my indoor soccer league. Like we were just always hanging. And yeah, he's such a insanely talented human being, writer. His voice is so crazy. And just getting in with you guys, feeling the vibes and everything like that was just so cool. And I think as we all kind of talked and shared our stories, it was really cool to find things that all of us personalized. For me, I was channeling my own situation of something I was going through at the time with a girl that I was dating and seemingly like not wanting to hurt them. And you could call them little white lies, but avoiding the confrontation by not saying fully what you should say, And I think that like all of us in the room at the time, just speaking our stories and how it spoke to us and everything was such a magical thing. And I think, your guys' production and Neil's voice is so special and so unique. He has so many different kinds of voices that he uses. Like he's got a soulful voice and a power and all these dark, moody and everything. But that one, like, and how you guys channeled it and produced everything, it just feels like such a beautiful thing, which was cool as like my first kind of collaboration with you guys to start it all off. And I'm glad that you guys wanted me back for other ones, but that was like such a cool first creation. And then even like the remix that came of it that was very like
drum and bass.
Amazing too. I was just like, oh, no way. The drum and bass version of this song is sick,
Yeah. Also, one thing that was interesting about the lyrics of White Lies to me was how personal, like Pool Hall on the West Side, like there's like these really, and we obviously when we write together, we have like, I feel like we spend most of the time just getting into like conversations, side conversations that take up most of the time. But like, do you want to talk a little about like the personal nature of some of those choices and like...
Yeah, I was definitely, for as much as I could, and I think different lyrics came from everybody in the room at like, oh, I like that. Hey, what if we did this or something? But as I was kind of going through, just walking through my life with this girl at the time and wanting to tell her certain things, but being in situations of not knowing when the right moment was and not wanting to hurt her, that like there's a delicate thing to choosing the timing and then being on your own and thinking about when do I talk to them about this, that I think in the beginnings it's like sit around, cigarette, Pool Hall on the West Side, second verse. It's like these moments that you can remember and they're like drenched in emotion and feeling of like, oh man, like I want to tell this person something, and it could be a family member, a significant other, like whatever, best friend. I want to tell them something, but I just don't know how they're going to take it, or like, will it affect our relationship? They say even like that whole thing of like, oh, if someone doesn't know who you are and they love you, then they don't really love you. If someone totally knows who you are, they might reject you. But like the essence of life and self-actualization would be like to fully open yourself up and be fully loved for your shadow self and everything else. That some of those darker things in the shadow is hard to admit. So it's also a juxtaposition almost on like white lies, but yet they could be innocent and small, but they're also, holding a darkness and a shadow in it that is creating more of a wall. And I think the production you guys did and Neil's voice, it's such a delicate thing that perfectly captures how he wrote it, like tongue-tied in a bow. Like, I wouldn't want you to know. Like, there's so many things that are just so perfect. And like how you guys said too, like that was such a slow song. And I think we knew it was special when we made it, but I think all of us were thinking, oh, it's probably too slow to be on a dance record, or like, who knows where it could ever go. Yeah, maybe we'll pitch it out. Years from now, it might land somewhere. And when you guys came back and were like, we revisit it, check this out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. It's exactly what it needed to be,
Yeah. No, I feel the same way.
A special song.
Yeah, and I love how deep you go into lyrics. Like it's the best. Like
We were just on, we were talking to Richard.
Yeah.
And we were just saying how you're like the song doctor.
yeah, big time. Totally.
Thank you guys so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Like, yeah, it's you. Everything in life is a mirror and a reflection, and I think that you guys bring out the best of me because you speak that and bring that on to me, and you channel that from me, that I can show up as my hopefully best, most authentic self, because you all also are like, oh yeah, this is the song doctor, yo, check this out, what do you got to say? That it's like, it's such a really cool synergistic relationship of energy bouncing back and forth between us that brings out, I think, the best in all of us. And those are the greatest artistic collaborations and the best friendships and human beings for creating art across lifetime. And I'm just, dude, there's no words that could ever express my gratitude to you guys and how you've treated me, how you've always appreciated me, been grateful, and looked at me as having value, because there is a hard part of this industry that some people don't value, some songwriters, or, there's so much of the industry, but you guys are just the best human beings that, I've ever worked with, artistically and just from a heart-centered, open place, that it's made such a difference in my career to give me value and a foundation to build on. Like, no, you know what? Like, I have something valuable that I can help bring to the table in an artistic collaboration in a room. And you guys have always
extremely
fed
valuable.
that and reinforced it so much.
Wow.
So thank you.
Thank you, man.
Well,
You have
thank you.
an extraordinary talent and extraordinary value to anybody. Like it's like, all right, cool. Well, we're gonna talk to you in the next couple episodes too. So we have a lot more to say. But thank you for joining us for this one. This is perfect.
Thanks for having me.
Find something that means everything to you now.
All right, so I think we're down to the last question.
Okay.
I think we got a lot. We've gotten this question a lot, so I'm going to try to rephrase it as a cool way to sort of end this episode. If you're on a desert island and you have to take one song from Something Everything as a CD single to play in your boombox that you have on your desert island, what's it going to be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it has to be Solid Gold Love for me. As much as like I obsess over Assassin, Solid Gold Love is the one. That's why I wear this hoodie more than any other hoodie.
Because the lyrics.
The lyrics just really speak so loudly to me. And I think it's important to always see them.
Yeah.
So that's why I always look down.
Yeah, Rich's lyrics are like, they're like life advice. It's like,
He
geez.
just knows how to like
Yeah.
take something and put it into like 5 words that just mean everything that you've been trying to say for your entire life. And
Crazy.
it's amazing.
Nice.
And you?
I'm going to go with White Lies.
Wow.
I love that. That song, like, I think also a lot of it's like we've played a lot of the songs.
I thought you were going to say Hold Me Closer.
No, but I wouldn't say I'm sick of it, but it's like for the last 4 or 5 years, we've played on the road. We've played every track from that album besides we do a version of 14. Like Salta is Salta and White Lies is like the only one we've never really played.
Yeah.
We've played Avalanche, In Control, Hold Me Closer, Assassin, Solid Gold Love, Now like everything.
True.
All That Remains, Don't Forget. We've played every track, and so I think I just feel like that one still feels almost like a song that we didn't make. And I love that track, and I love that we were able to make it for this album. And
So should we bring it back to the live show?
yeah, maybe one day do it. Or the drum and bass, the Kino remix is so good.
That's so
I
good
don't know.
too.
I love that song. It sums up the soul, like in a way, the sort of, not the soul of this album, because I think that's sort of maybe somewhere else, but like where we were willing to go on this album, I feel like is White Lies feels like I don't know, I'm very proud of it because it's like unexpected, but it still fits into this album. And it's like, oh yeah, we can make a track that's 84 BPM or whatever, right? So, yeah, that's my choice.
Awesome choice.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I think we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks so much to Nathan and Richard and Dan and McKay for chatting with us. We're going to hear more from Dan and Nathan and McKay on some of the other episodes. We'll be back next time with episode 2 about Forever Now. We'll see you guys then.